Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining in today's reading. Today we are going to read one of the Srila Prabhupada's books, A Second Chance. This book, A Second Chance, the story of near-death experience with Srila Prabhupada. This explores the ancient Vedic history of Ajamila, who was a young religious man. He was originally a religious man and a devotee, but then he falls into a life of crime and debauchery. But he is saved at the time of death by chanting God's name. Based on Srimad-Bhagavatam, this book explains the nature of the soul and how the soul journeys through different lives, and then the law of karma, life after death, and the necessity of purifying one's consciousness, and the potency of bhakti-yoga, to grant spiritual liberation and a second chance at life. In this book, of course, and we are reading from vedabase.io. Vedabase.io is a free online multilingual research tool designed primarily to explore the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the Founder-Ācārya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And the rights for all the content that we are presenting here is all reserved by the BBT, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust International. And database, of course, is maintained by all these devotees here mentioned. So we are really thankful for the BBT for providing all these books, for printing and making it available, and also vedabase.io for all these devotees for making this available for all online. So before reading the book, so we're going to offer some prayers, take the blessings of the devotees and the deities. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamakyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitamsya Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha Krupa sindubhya cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Sri Vasadi Gauda Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. As I said, the book that we are going to read today it's called A Second Chance. Introduction. As the sinful Ajamila lay on his deathbed, he was terrified to see three fierce human-like creatures coming to drag him out of his dying body and take him away to the abode of Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, for punishment. Surprisingly, Ajamil escaped this terrible fate. How? We'll find out in the pages of A Second Chance, the story of a near-death experience. You will also learn many vital truths about the fundamental nature of the self and reality, so you can better prepare yourself for your own inevitable encounters with death and dying. Even today, people momentarily on the verge of death report encounters like Ajamil's, lending credibility to the idea that there is life after death. In 1982, George Gallup Jr. published a book called Adventures in Immortality, which contained results of a survey on American beliefs about the afterlife, including near-death and out-of-body experiences. 67% of people surveyed said they believe in life after death, and 15% said they themselves had had some kind of near-death experience. The people who reported a near-death experience were then asked to describe it. 9% reported an out-of-body sensation, and 8% felt that a special being or beings were present during the near-death experience. The Gallup survey is intriguing, but it leaves unanswered this basic question. Is there any scientific evidence for near-death experiences, particularly of the out-of-body type? Apparently, there is, from studies of people on the verge of death who, while supposedly unconscious, accurately report events relating to their physical body from a perspective outside it. Heart attack patients, accident victims, and soldiers wounded in battle have all reported such experiences. Dr. Michael Sabon, a cardiologist at the Emory University Medical School, undertook a scientific study of such reports. He interviewed 32 cardiac arrest patients who reported out-of-body experiences. During a cardiac arrest, the heart stops pumping blood to the brain, and so a patient should be totally unconscious. Yet, 26 of the 32 patients reporting out-of-body experiences during cardiac arrest were able to give fairly accurate visual accounts of their resuscitation, and the remaining 6 gave extremely accurate accounts of the specific resuscitation techniques, matching confidential hospital records of their operations. The results of Sabon's study, detailed in his book Recollections of Death, a Medical Investigation, 1982, convinced him of the reality of out-of-body experiences. He concluded that the mind was an entity distinct from the brain, and that the near-death crisis causes the mind and brain to split apart for a brief time. Sabon wrote, "Could the mind which splits apart from the physical brain be in essence the soul, which continues to exist after the final bodily death, according to some religious doctrines? As I see it, this is the ultimate question that has been raised by reports of the NDE, near-death experience. The true dimensions of that ultimate question are thoroughly explored in A Second Chance by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founding spiritual master, Ācārya, of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Thousands of years ago in India, the history concerning Ajamila and his near-death experience was related by the great spiritual master Sukadeva Goswami to his disciple King Parikshit. Their conversation is recorded in the 6th canto of the Sanskrit classic Srimad-Bhagavatam, renowned as the ripened fruit of the tree of India's timeless Vedic literature. In 1975-76, in the course of translating the Srimad-Bhagavatam into English, Srila Prabhupada translated the story of Ajamila. And as with the rest of the work, in addition to the text, he provided an illuminating commentary on each verse. But this was not the first time Srila Prabhupada had explained the story of Ajamila. During the winter of 1970-71, Srila Prabhupada was traveling with some of his Western disciples in India. They had heard him speak about Ajamila several times. And at their request, he now gave a systematic series of lectures of the Ajamila story. Thus, A Second Chance consists of texts from the sixth canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, reproduced here in boldface type, selections from Srila Prabhupada's commentary, and excerpts from transcriptions of his lectures during the 70-71 India tour. The history of Ajamila is dramatic, powerful, and engaging. And the short philosophical and metaphysical debates that punctuate the action as Ajamila confronts the messengers of death and finds deliverance are bound to excite the interest of those concerned with life's deepest questions. The publishers. Chapter 1. Separating the men from the animals. Sukadeva Goswami said to King Parikshit, in the city known as Kanyakubja, Kanauj in present-day India, there lived a Brahmana named Ajamila, who married a prostitute maid-servant and lost all his Brahminical qualities because of the association of that low-class woman. Ajamila gave trouble to others by arresting them, by cheating them in gambling, or by directly plundering them. This was the way he earned his livelihood and maintained his wife and children. Srimad-Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 1st chapter, texts 21 and 22. The law of consequences. Although Ajamila was born of a Brahmana father and strictly followed the regulated principles, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling, he fell in love with a prostitute, and therefore all his good qualities were lost. As soon as a person abandons regulative principles, he engages in various kinds of sinful activities. The regulative principles serve to keep us on the standard of human life. But if we abandon them, we fall down into illusory life or Maya. If we want to advance in spiritual life, we must follow the regulative principles and rectify the mistakes of our past lives and this present life. Only those who have become free from all kinds of sinful reactions and are now engaged in pious activities can fully understand God. Persons who commit sinful activities and who are overly attached to bodily comforts and mundane friendship, society, and family affection cannot be spiritually self-realized. The fault of illicit connection with women is that it destroys all one's Brahminical qualities. Ajamila abandoned all the regulative principles due to his association with a prostitute. He became a cheater and a thief. One who acts dishonestly will be punished. One who acts dishonestly will be punished. He may escape the king's or the government's law, but he can never escape God's law. The materialists think, I am cheating God and I can continue to gratify my senses by all nefarious activities. But the Shastras, scriptures, state that such persons are cheating their own happiness in the end, because they will have to accept a material body again and suffer accordingly. A man who is born in a Brahmana family is expected to be truthful and self-controlled, to be fully cognizant of spiritual life and its practical application, and to have complete faith in the statements of the Shastras. If a person does not follow the Shastras, he becomes degraded. The great sages and rishis throughout the world have given guidance, and their words are recorded in the Shastras. But rascals and fools misinterpret the scriptures and misguide the people. At present, the Bhagavad Gita is interpreted in so many different ways, and these so-called explanations are accepted by the innocent public as authoritative knowledge. One interpreter explains that the battlefield of Kurukshetra refers to the material body, and that the 5 Pandava brothers are really the 5 senses of the material body. But this is not the proper understanding. How can anyone explain the Bhagavad Gita when he does not understand it? Such an attempt is nonsense. To understand the bona fide science of God, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master and hear the Bhagavad Gita from him. We have to follow the great personalities, the previous Acharyas, spiritual masters. That will be to our profit. We should not speculate and make up our own statements. We should simply accept the injunctions given by the great Acharyas, because that is the process of the Vedic system. One must approach a bona fide spiritual master and inquire from him submissively. The absolute truth is explained in the scriptures, and the scriptures are explained by the spiritual master or a saintly person. Whatever the bona fide self-realized spiritual master says must be accepted. There is no room for interpretation of the Shastras. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam it is said that Krishna lifted Govardhana hill just as a child lifts a mushroom. He did it so easily, but people do not believe it. Those who do not believe in the Bhagavatam interpret an indirect meaning. The meaning is clear and there is nothing to be misunderstood, but these rascals draw their own conclusions nonetheless. When the language is clear, why should we interpret? By interpretation, so-called scholars and theologians have played havoc with the Vedic literature. No bona fide Acharya has ever interpreted the Shastras according to his own whims, but many so-called modern scholars and leaders have done so. And therefore, people are gliding down into the most abominable conditions of material existence. In the interest of the people, these rascals should be exposed. Therefore, we are presenting the Bhagavad Gita as it is. The degradation of modern society. Here, the Srimad-Bhagavatam says that the Brahmana Ajamila became attached to a prostitute and thus lost his Brahminical qualifications. He was a young man of about 20 when this happened. Because of his illicit association with the prostitute, Ajamila was forced to live by begging, borrowing, stealing, and gambling. These verses indicate how degraded one becomes simply by indulging in illicit sex with a prostitute. Illicit sex is not possible with chaste women, but only with unchaste women. The more society allows prostitution and illicit sex, the more impetus it gives to cheaters, thieves, plunderers, drunkards, and gamblers. Therefore, we first advise all the disciples in our Krishna Consciousness movement to avoid illicit sex, which is the beginning of all abominable life, and which is followed by meat eating, gambling, and intoxication, one after another. Of course, restraint is difficult, but it is quite possible if one fully surrenders to Krishna, since all abominable habits gradually become distasteful for a Krishna conscious person. While in his time, Ajamila was an exception. In the present age, there are millions of Ajamilas. But if illicit sex is allowed to increase, the entire society will be condemned, for it will be full of rogues, thieves, cheaters, and so forth. Therefore, if we actually want to improve the world situation, we have to take to Krishna consciousness, as that gives the best service to human society, both materially and spiritually. Whatever abominable characteristics we have developed, we have only to take to the process of bhakti-yoga or devotional service in order to completely eradicate them. We have developed so many anarthas, or unwanted habits, the chief of which are meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. But we can curb them by accepting the principles of bhakti-yoga as they are presented in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Scarcely anyone knows these Vedic scriptures, and therefore no one heeds their instructions. People would rather heed all kinds of books by all kinds of rascals. But the result of such books is to kill Krishna consciousness. In illusion, a person may think he can get rid of unwanted habits and be saved by some artificial mystic meditation. And in fact, at one time, it was possible to attain liberation by practicing Ashtanga Yoga or eightfold yogic meditation. But at present, almost no one can follow this process. And artificial attempts at yoga will not help us. Therefore, to help the fallen people of this age of Kali, the Supreme Lord appeared 500 years ago as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu He knew that the people of this age would not even be able to follow the regulative principles, what to speak of practicing Ashtanga Yoga. Therefore, he gave the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, so that we can gradually be elevated to the highest position of spiritual life. Other processes of purification or sacrifice cannot be followed in this age, because for the most part, people are too degraded. But anyone may take to this process of chanting Hare Krishna. As it is stated in the Brihad Narada Purana 3.8.126, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Iva Kevalam, Kalau Nastaiva, Nastaiva, Nastaiva Gatiranyatha. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy name of the Lord. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. Chanting the holy name of the Lord is always superbly effective, but it is especially effective in the age of Kali. Its practical effectiveness will now be explained by Sukadeva Goswami through the history of Ajamila, who was freed from the hands of Yamaraj, the universal judge, simply because of chanting the holy name of Narayana. The dangers of illicit sex. To benefit fully from chanting the holy name of the Lord, one needs to chant offenselessly. And to guarantee offenseless chanting, some austerity is required. First of all, one should not indulge in illicit sex. Sex is one of the bodily needs, so it is sanctioned in the Shastras to some degree. One is allowed to live peacefully with one's wife and have sex for begetting children. Other than to beget children, however, there is no need of indulging in sex. One who does not take the responsibility of family life but remains a bachelor and engages in illicit sex is considered irresponsible, and he will have to suffer the consequences. Of course, one who thinks that family life is too big a responsibility can forego it and thus avoid a lot of trouble. Family responsibility is very great. Therefore, if a man feels he cannot accept the responsibility, he should remain a brahmachari, a celibate student. A person who practices the science of brahmacharya under the care of a spiritual master automatically becomes 75% free from material entanglement. Today, however, no one wants to undergo the austerities of brahmacharya. Everyone wants to remain unmarried, but also engage in sex. In this way, people are losing all good character. To maintain a woman who is nothing more than a prostitute and engage in illicit sex with her for producing children is sinful. Such children are unwanted, Varna Sankara. And in this way, society becomes degraded. Ajamila became attracted to a prostitute, and with her he begot 10 children. He became so degraded that he could not execute honest business to support his large family. And he was forced to beg, borrow, and steal to maintain them. If a person indulges in illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling, automatically follow. His expenses will be unlimited. And to meet all his expenses, he will have to adopt methods of cheating and stealing. The basis for Ajamila's degradation was his illicit connection with the prostitute. Therefore, in the practice of Krishna consciousness, we do not allow any illicit sex. Devotees must either get married or remain celibate. This regulation is very effective for maintaining a high standard of purity. Chapter 2. In imitation of the original. Sukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, 88 years of his life passed by while Ajamila thus spent his time in abominable, sinful activities to maintain his family of 10 sons and the prostitute. The youngest child was a baby named Narayana, who was naturally very dear to his father and mother. Srimad-Bhagavatam 6.1 to 23 and 24. Parental affection. Ajamila's sinfulness is shown by the fact that although he was 88 years old, he had a very young child. According to Vedic culture, one should leave home as soon as he has reached 50 years of age. One should not live at home and go on producing children. Sex is allowed for 25 years, between the ages of 25 and 50. After that, one should give up the habit of sex and leave home as vanaprastha, and then properly take sannyas. Ajamila, however, because of his association with a prostitute, lost all Brahminical culture and became more sinful, even in his so-called household life. Ajamila was a young man of 20 when he met the prostitute, and he begot 10 children in her. When he was almost 90 years old, the time came when he was to die. At that time, most of his children were grown up. So, naturally, the youngest child, Narayana, became his parents' favorite, and Ajamila was very much attached to him. A baby's smile immediately attracts the father, mother, and relatives. When the child begins to talk, making sounds in broken language, it is very joyful for the parents. Unless this attraction is there, it is not possible to raise the child with affection. Parental affection is natural, even among the animal species. In Kanpur, a monkey once came with her baby near the room where we were staying. The baby monkey entered the window through the bars, and the mother became very upset. She became mad with anxiety. Somehow or other, we pushed the baby monkey out of the bars, and immediately the mother embraced the baby and took it away with her. In human society, the affection between a mother and her child is very much eulogized. But as we see, this relationship is visible even among the animals. Therefore, it is not an outstanding qualification. It is material nature's law. Unless the mother and child are affectionately connected, it is not possible for the child to grow up. Parental affection is natural and necessary, but it does not raise one to the spiritual platform. The character of the debauchee Ajamila was abominable, but he was still very affectionate toward his youngest child. Although Ajamila was nearly 90, he was still enjoying the child's playful pastimes, just as Maharaj Nanda and Mother Yashoda enjoyed the childhood pastimes of Lord Krishna. Spiritual affection and variety. Parental affection in this material world is perverted reflection of parental affection in the spiritual world, where it is found in its pure original form. Everything originates with the transcendental reality. As stated in the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.2, Janmajyasya. The Supreme Absolute Truth is the Supreme Absolute Truth is that from which everything emanates. If the affection between a child and his parents did not exist in the Absolute Truth, it could not exist in the material world. Since the Absolute Truth is the source of everything, whatever varieties we see here in this material world are simply reflections of the varieties in the spiritual world. If the Absolute Truth were without variety, then where have all these varieties come from? No. The Absolute Truth is not impersonal, Nirakara, or without variety, Nirviseshvara. Still, some persons called Mayavadis are so disappointed and frustrated with the imperfect varieties of this material world that they imagine the spiritual world to be impersonal and without variety. These impersonalists realize that they are Brahman or spirit, but they do not know that there are innumerable planets in the Brahma Jyoti or spiritual atmosphere. They think that the Brahma Jyoti itself is all in all. The impersonalists have no information on the Vaikuntha planets, and due to their imperfect knowledge, they again come down to these material planets. As stated in the Srimad-Bhagavatam 10.2.32, Enyera vindaksha vimukta vaninas tvayasta bhavat avishuddha buddhaya aruhya kruchena param padam tata patanchadho anadruta yushmadangraya. Although impersonalists are almost liberated, still on account of their negligence of the lotus feet of Krishna, their intelligence is not yet purified. Thus, despite performing severe austerities to rise up to the platform of Brahman, they must fall down again to this material world. Spiritual form and spiritual pastimes. The impersonalist philosophers cannot differentiate between activities in the material world and similar activities in the spiritual world. Nor do they differentiate between the material form and God's form. They are convinced that the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, the spiritual effulgence emanating from the Lord's body, is the supreme absolute truth. The Mayavadis mistakenly assume that when God appears, he accepts a material body, just as we have taken this material form in the material world. That kind of thinking is impersonalism or Mayavada philosophy. God has a form, but not a material form like ours. His form is Satchidananda Vigraha. It's explained in the Brahma Samhita 5.1. A spiritual form full of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Anyone who understands the transcendental nature of Krishna's form achieves perfection. This Krishna confirms in the Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo vetti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma neti mameti sojuna. When I come, I do not accept a material body. My birth and activities are completely spiritual, and anyone who perfectly understands this is liberated. When Krishna displayed himself as the perfect child before Mother Yashoda, he would break everything when she did not supply him with butter, as if he were in need of butter. So God can display himself exactly like an ordinary human being, yet he remains the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Impersonalists cannot know God because they see him as an ordinary man. This is rascaldom, as Krishna declares in the Bhagavad Gita 9.11. Avajananti mam mudha. Only rascals accept me as an ordinary human being. The Mayavadis say, oh, here is a child. How can he be God? Even Brahma and Indra became bewildered. They thought, how can this boy be the Supreme Lord? Let me test him. Sometimes a so-called incarnation of God declares, I am God. He should be tested to determine whether or not he is actually God. The Mayavadis are claiming, I am God, I am Krishna, I am Rama. Everyone becomes Krishna. Everyone becomes Rama. Yet people do not challenge their claims. If you are Rama, exhibit your supreme potency. Rama constructed a bridge over the Indian Ocean. What have you done? At the age of 7, Krishna lifted Govardhana hill. What have you done? When they are challenged by Krishna's pastimes, these rascals say it is all fiction, it is all legend. Therefore, people accept an ordinary person as Rama or Krishna. This nonsense is going on. And both those who declare themselves to be God and those who accept them as God will have to suffer for it. Anyone can claim to be God, and any foolish person can accept, but no one will benefit by serving a false God. Once Lord Brahma thought that Krishna might also be such a false God. He observed that a mere boy in Vrindavan, India, was accepted as the Supreme Lord and that he was performing extraordinary activities. So Brahma decided to make a test. He took away all of Krishna's cows and playmates and hid them. When Brahma returned to Vrindavana after 1 year and saw the same cows and playmates still there, he could understand that Krishna had expanded himself by his unlimited potency into so many cows and boys. The boys' own mothers could not detect that their sons were Krishna's expansions. Though the mothers could not explain why every evening when their boys returned home from the fields, their affection for them increased more and more. Finally, Brahma surrendered to Krishna, composing very nice prayers in glorification of the Lord. Similarly, Indra became bewildered when Krishna told his father, Nanda Maharaj, there is no need of performing sacrifices to Indra because he is under the order of the Supreme Lord. Krishna did not say to Nanda Maharaj, I am the Supreme Lord, but he said, Indra is under the order of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, he has to supply you with water. So there is no need of performing this yajna, sacrifice to him. When the sacrifice to Indra was stopped, he became furious and tried to punish the inhabitants of Vrindavana by sending incessant torrents of rain for 7 days. Vrindavana was nearly drowned in water. So great was the downpour. But Krishna, a child of about 7 years, immediately lifted Govardhana hill and invited all the residents of Vrindavana, together with their animals, to take shelter underneath the hill. Krishna held up the hill for 7 days and nights without taking any food or rest, just to protect the residents of Vrindavana. Thus Indra understood that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, the Srimad-Bhagavatam warns that if even great personalities like Brahma and Indra can sometimes become bewildered by Maya, the external manifestation of Krishna's energy, then what to speak of us? So God displays himself as God and sometimes as a human being, but the rascal impersonalists dismiss his pastimes as legend or mythology. Either they do not believe in the Shastras or they interpret them in their own way, using Ardhakukuti Nyaya, the logic of half a hen. Once a man kept a hen and that delivered a golden egg every day. The foolish man thought, it is very profitable, but it is expensive to feed this hen. Better that I cut off her head and save the expense of feeding her. Then I will get the egg without any charge. The impersonalists accept the Shastras in this way. They think, oh, this is not good. It is inconvenient. We shall cut this portion out. When Krishna says one should see me everywhere, the rascal Mayavadis think it is very palatable. But when he says, give up everything and surrender to me, they disagree. They accept what is convenient and reject what is not. But the Acharyas do not distort the Shastras in this way. When Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna said, I accept whatever you have said. The absolute truth, full of knowledge. The Vedanta Sutra is accepted as the supreme authority of all Vedic literature. And the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.2 says, Janmajyasya yataha. The absolute truth is the original source of everything. Janma means birth. There is no question of interpretation. The meaning is clear. Everything in this material world comes out of the absolute truth. Just as this body comes out of the womb of our mother. Janmajyasya yataha. Beginning from birth up to the annihilation, everything is an emanation from the absolute truth. The absolute truth is that which is the source of everything, the reservoir of everything, and the maintainer of everything. What are the characteristics of the original source? The Srimad-Bhagavatam 1.1.1 says, Janmajya setonvayat itarataschardheshva bhignaswarat. The original source of everything must be supremely cognizant of everything, both directly and indirectly. He is the Supreme Spirit. And he knows everything because he is perfect. We are also spiritual sparks. And as soon as a spiritual spark takes shelter in the womb of a mother, it develops a body. That means that the spiritual spark is the source of the body and all its mechanisms. Although it is by our energy that this body is produced, we do not know how our veins are created and how our bones are created. And because we do not know, we are not God. But Krishna knows. This is the characteristic of the absolute truth. He knows everything. Krishna confirms this in the Bhagavad Gita 7.26. I know everything that has happened in the past, everything that is happening now, and everything that will happen in the future. We become cognizant of the absolute truth by accepting knowledge from a spiritual master. But how has Krishna become perfectly cognizant? How is Krishna's knowledge is so perfect? Because he is fully independent, Swarat, he does not have to learn anything from anyone. Some rascal may try to realize himself as God by taking knowledge from a Mayavadi, but Krishna is God without taking knowledge from anyone. That is God. Chapter 3, at the final hour. Sukadeva Goswami continued. Because of the child's broken language and awkward movements, old Ajamila was very much attached to him. He always took care of the child and enjoyed his activities. When Ajamila chewed food and ate it, he called the child to chew and eat. And when he drank, he called the child to drink also. Always engaged in taking care of the child and calling his name Narayana, Ajamila could not understand that his own time was now exhausted and that death was upon him. When the time of death arrived for the foolish Ajamila, he began thinking exclusively of his son Narayana. Srimad-Bhagavatam 6.1 from 25 to 27. A child's name. Here it is clearly mentioned that the child Narayana was so young that he could not even speak or walk properly. Since the old man was very attached to the child and he enjoyed the child's activities, and because the child's name was Narayana, the old man always chanted the holy name of Narayana. Although Ajamila was referring to the small child and not the original Narayana, the name of Narayana is so powerful that even by chanting his son's name, he was becoming purified. Srila Rupa Goswami has therefore declared that if one's mind is somehow or other attracted by the holy name of Krishna, tasmat kenapi upayena manak krishne niveshayet, one is on the path of liberation. In India, even today, parents often give their children names of God, such as Krishna, Govinda, or Narayana. Thus, the parents chant the names of Krishna, Govinda, or Narayana and get the chance to be purified. At the time of death, Ajamila was chanting the name of Narayana in connection with his youngest child. Since Ajamila was the son of a Brahmana, he had been accustomed to worshipping Narayana in his youth. Because in every Brahmana's house there is the worship of Narayana. Therefore, although the contaminated Ajamila was calling for his son, by concentrating his mind on the holy name of Narayana, he remembered the Narayana he had very faithfully worshipped in his youth. The value of remembering Narayana at the time of death is explained in the second canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam 2.1.6. Etavam Sankhya Yogabhyam Swadharma Parinishthaya Janmalabha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. The highest perfection of human life achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by acquirement of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of one's occupational duty is to remember Narayana, the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Somehow or other, therefore, Ajamila consciously or unconsciously chanted the name of Narayana at the time of death and became all perfect. Death, a critical time of life. As mentioned above, one's mentality at the time of death is all important. But if we become complacent and think, oh, death take place, what of it? Then we cannot advance on the spiritual path. Just as the air carries fragrances, so a person's mentality at the time of death will carry him to his next life. If he has cultivated the mentality of a Vaishnava, a pure devotee of Krishna, then he will immediately be transferred to Vaikuntha. But if he has cultivated the mentality of an ordinary karmi, a fruity worker, then he will have to stay in this material world to suffer the consequences of the kind of mentality he has thus created. Suppose I am a businessman. If I simply do business up till the point of death, naturally my mentality will be business. One Calcutta businessman at the time of death asked about the management of his mill. He might have taken his next birth as a rat in his mill. This is possible. At the time of death, whatever you are thinking will carry you to your next body. Krishna is very kind, and whatever mentality one is absorbed in at the time of death, Krishna will provide an appropriate body. All right, you are thinking like a rat, become a rat. You are thinking like a tiger, become a tiger. You are thinking like my devotee, come to me. By chanting Hare Krishna, we can mold our thoughts so that we are always thinking of Krishna. As Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita 6.47, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana. The first class yogi is he who always thinks of me within his heart. The Krishna Consciousness movement is especially meant for helping the members of human society to come to this state of full Krishna consciousness. Then at the end of life, one will simply remember Krishna. Whatever you practice throughout your life will determine your consciousness at death. That is natural. One who properly prepares for the time of death is really intelligent, while one who thinks he can remain at home forever and enjoy the association of his wife and children is a fool. In illusion, a man thinks, my bank balance, my nice house, and my family will protect me. But these cannot protect anyone. The Srimad-Bhagavatam 2.1.4 declares, Dehapachya kalatradishu atmasainyeshu asatsvapi tesham pramatto nisanam pashyannapi na pashyati. One who is mad thinks my strong body, my grown-up children, my good wife, and my bank balance will save me. We are simply struggling in this material world like soldiers fighting on a battlefield. Our soldiers are our children, our wife, our bank balance, our countrymen, etc. The Srimad Bhagavatam wants us not to take shelter of such fallible soldiers. Even though a man has seen that his father and grandfather who were once living are existing no more, he does not see that likewise everyone, including himself, will be destroyed. How can he protect his son? How can his son protect him? These questions do not arise for the materialist, who is simply engrossed in the animal propensities of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. Chapter 4. Neither birth nor death. Sukadeva Goswami continued. Ajamila then saw three awkward persons with deformed bodily features, fierce, twisted faces, and hair standing erect on their bodies. With ropes in their hands, they had come to take him away to the abode of Yamaraja. When he saw them, he was extremely bewildered, and because of attachment to his child, who was playing nearby, Ajamila began to call him loudly by his name. Thus, with tears in his eyes, he somehow or other chanted the name of Narayana. Srimad-Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, 1st Chapter, text 28-29. Anxious to save themselves from death. At the time of death, people become very anxious to save themselves, especially those who have been sinful. Of course, the soul itself is not subject to death. Nahanyate hanyamane serire. But leaving the present body and entering into another body is very painful. At death, the living entity can no longer bear to remain in his present body. The pain is so acute. Sometimes when a person's life becomes too painful, he commits suicide. But suicide is a sin punishable by the loss of karma. When Ajamila was dying, he saw three ferocious and very frightening persons with ropes in their hands, unruly hair on their heads, and bodily hair like bristles. These assistants of Yamaraja, the Yamadutas, had come to drag Ajamila out of his body and take him to the court of Yamaraja. Sometimes a dying man cries out in fear when he sees the Yamadutas. Ajamila too became very fearful. Fortunately, even though Ajamila was referring to his son, he chanted the holy name of Narayana. And therefore, the order carriers of Narayana, the Vishnudutas, also immediately arrived there. Because Ajamila was extremely afraid of the ropes of Yamaraja, he chanted the Lord's name with tearful eyes. Actually, however, he never meant to chant the holy name of Narayana. He meant to call his son. The appearance and disappearance of Krishna and his devotees. One may ask, the devotees die and the non-devotees also die. What is the difference? It is like this. The mother cat may catch a rat and carry it in her mouth. And she also carries her kittens in her mouth. It is the same mouth, but the kittens are comfortable and safe, whereas the rat is feeling the jaws of death. Similarly, at the time of death, the devotees are transferred to the spiritual realm, Vaikuntha, whereas the ordinary sinful man is dragged down to the hellish regions of Yamadutas, the constables of Yamaraja. This was apparently to be Ajamila's fate. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam. My appearance and disappearance are spiritual, transcendental. They are not ordinary. Why does Krishna appear in the world, in this world? That he explains in the previous verse, Bhagavad Gita 4.8. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrutam dharma samsthapanardhaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I appeared millennium after millennium. God's only business is to protect the faithful devotees and to kill the demoniac. Therefore, we find Lord Vishnu pictured with his weapons, the club and chakra, disc, for protecting the devotees, and the lotus flower and conch for their benediction. Similarly, transcendental are the appearance and disappearance of Krishna's devotees, who are sent to this material world to preach the glories of the Lord. According to the principles of Vaishnavism, both the appearance and the disappearance of such Vaishnavas or devotees of Vishnu, Krishna, are all auspicious. Therefore, we hold festivals in their honor on the anniversaries of both days. Actually, even ordinary living entities never take birth or die. What to speak of Krishna and his devotees? Sometimes atheistic men say God is dead. They do not know that even the smallest living entity does not die. So how can God be dead? These are described in the Bhagavad Gita as mudhas, or foolish rascals. They have no knowledge but pose themselves as learned men and mutter something that is good neither for them nor the public. Liberation via thinking of Krishna. Because somehow or other Ajamila became absorbed in thinking of Narayana or Krishna at the time of death, he immediately became eligible for liberation. Even though he had acted sinfully throughout his entire life, one can think of Krishna in any capacity. The gopis, Krishna's cowherd girlfriends, were absorbed in thinking of Krishna out of what appeared to be lusty desire. Shishupala became absorbed in thinking of Krishna out of anger, and Kamsa incessantly thought of Krishna out of fear. Kamsa and Shishupala were demons, but because they thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead throughout their lives, and at the time of death, they were granted liberation by Krishna himself. Of course, it is best if one thinks of Krishna favorably. Bhakti or devotional service means thinking favorably of Krishna. Shishupala and Kamsa were not devotees, because the word devotee implies someone who is favorably disposed toward Krishna. Thinking of Krishna in the opposite way, however, is also accepted by Krishna. Krishna is so kind that anyone who thinks of him always, even as an enemy, becomes the greatest yogi and attains liberation. Thus, the results of yogic performances and austerities were achieved even by such inimical personalities as Kamsa and Shishupala. In the impersonal Brahman effulgence, Brahma Jyoti, we find not only the highest learned scholars, Jnanis, who have struggled to attain Brahman, but also those persons who constantly think of Krishna in enmity. They also enter into that spiritual effulgence. Thus, the destination achieved by the Jnanis is also achieved by the enemies of Krishna. This, however, is not very desirable. A living entity can remain for some time in the Brahman effulgence, Brahma Jyoti, as a tiny shining spiritual particle. As there are many molecular particles of sunshine, similarly the living entities can live as small particles of spiritual effulgence in the Brahma Jyoti. But they are subject to fall down into this material creation again. By nature, the living entities want varieties of sense enjoyment. But in that impersonal existence, there are no varieties of enjoyment. So when they desire to enjoy, they have to come again to this material world. Therefore, if one merges into the Brahman effulgence, there is every chance of falling down. Krishna's devotees do not desire liberation because their only interest is to be engaged in devotional service to Krishna, whether in the material world or in the spiritual world. Still, by the mercy of Krishna, they attain liberation by being elevated to the planet of Goloka Vrindavana, the residence of Krishna, where the material miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease are conspicuous by their absence. That the devotee's position is different from that of the impersonalist and Jnanis. The devotee's position is very exalted. He also passes through the Brahman effulgence, but he is not attracted to it. He is attracted to the Vaikuntha planets, especially Goloka Vrindavana, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead lives eternally with his associates. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, the Vishnu Dutas to the rescue. Sukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamila, who had certainly chanted without offense, because he had chanted in complete anxiety. The order carriers of Yamaraj were snatching the soul from the core of Ajamila's heart. But with resounding voices, the Vishnu Dutas forbade them to do so. Srimad-Bhagavatam 6.1, text 30 and 31st. The messengers dispatched by the Lord. The Yamadutas, who are assistants of Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, had come to drag Ajamila away. Ajamila appealed to his youngest son, Narayana. Narayana, please come here, I am dying. Krishna is so kind that as soon as he heard Ajamila chant Narayana at the time of his death, he immediately dispatched his assistants, the Vishnu Dutas, to give Ajamila a shelter. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti remarks that the Vishnu Dutas came because they heard Ajamila chant the holy name of their master Narayana without considering why he was chanting. While chanting the name of Narayana, Ajamila was actually thinking of his son, but simply because they heard Ajamila chant the Lord's name, the Vishnu Dutas immediately came for Ajamila's protection. Chanting of the Lord's holy name is actually meant for his glorification. Ajamila, however, did not glorify the Lord. He simply chanted the holy name of Narayana because of his excessive attachment to his son. Nevertheless, because of his past good fortune in having rendered devotional service to Narayana in his youth, he apparently chanted the holy name in full devotional service and without offense. Thus, that chanting was sufficient to cleanse him of all sinful reactions and assure him the protection of the Vishnu Dutas. The name Narayana has the full potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayana or Krishna. That is the secret of Nama Sankirtana, chanting the names of God. By chanting the holy name of Krishna, we make immediate contact with Krishna himself. The reason for this is that the Lord's name is not material. It is spiritual and absolute. Thus, there is no difference between Krishna and his name. Snatching the soul. When the Vishnu Dutas arrived, they spoke to the Yamadutas with extreme gravity. What are you doing? Stop. You cannot take this man to Yamaraja. A Vaishnava, one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, is always protected by Lord Vishnu's order carriers. Because Ajamila has chanted the holy name of Narayana, the Vishnu Dutas not only immediately arrived on the spot, but also at once ordered the Yamadutas not to touch him. By speaking with resounding voices, the Vishnu Dutas threatened to punish the Yamadutas if they continued trying to snatch Ajamila's soul from his heart. The order carriers of Yamaraja have jurisdiction over all sinful living entities, but the messengers of Lord Vishnu are capable of punishing anyone, including Yamaraja, if he wrongs a Vaishnava. Modern scientists do not know where to find the soul within the body with their material instruments. But here, the Srimad-Bhagavatam clearly explains that the soul is within the core of the heart, Hridaya. It is from the heart that the Yamadutas were trying to extract the soul of Ajamila. The heart is part of the mechanical arrangement of the body. As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 18.61, Ishvara sarva bhutanam ruddeshe arjuna tisthati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Yantra means machine, such as an automobile. The driver of the machine of the body is the individual soul, who is also its director or proprietor. But the supreme director and proprietor is the personality of Godhead in his form as the super soul. One's body is created through the agency of Maya according to one's activities in one's past life. And according to one's activities in this life, Maya creates another body for the next life. At the appropriate time, One's next body is immediately chosen, and both the individual soul and the super soul transfer to that particular bodily machine. This is the process of transmigration of the soul. During transmigration from one body to the next, the sinful soul is taken away by the outer carriers of Yamaraj and put into a particular type of hellish life in order to become accustomed to the condition in which he will live in his next body. Chapter 6. The Residents of the Spiritual Sky. Sukadeva Goswami continued, when the order carriers of Yamaraja, the son of the sun god, were thus forbidden, they replied, who are you, sirs, that have the audacity to challenge the jurisdiction of Yamaraja? Whose servants are you? Where have you come from? And why are you forbidding us to touch the body of Ajamila? Are you demigods from the heavenly planets? Are you sub-demigods? Or are you the best of devotees? Your eyes are just like the petals of lotus flowers. Dressed in yellow silken garments decorated with garlands of lotuses, and wearing very attractive helmets on your heads and earrings on your ears, you all appear fresh and youthful. Your 4 long arms are decorated with bows and quivers of arrows, and with swords, clubs, conch shells, discs, and lotus flowers. Your effulgence has dissipated the darkness here with extraordinary illumination. Now, sirs, why are you obstructing us? Srimad-Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 1st chapter, text 32 to 36. Divine interference. The sins Ajamila had committed placed him within the jurisdiction of Yamaraja, the supreme judge appointed to consider the sins of the living entities. When forbidden to touch Ajamila, the order carriers of Yamaraja were surprised, because within all the 3 worlds, no one had ever before hindered them in the execution of their duty. The Vishnudutas were coming from Vaikuntha, and they appeared extraordinary, each with 4 arms. The servants of Yamaraja immediately received them with respect. They had no idea which planet the Vishnudutas had come from, so they simply suggested, you must have come from a very exalted planet. But why are you interfering with our business? We are Yamadutas. It is our duty to arrest every sinful man. And Ajamila has committed misdeeds throughout his life. Now, at the end of his life, we are authorized to take him to Yamaraja, the sons of Vivaswan, the sun god. So why are you preventing us? The most significant word used in verse 32 is Siddha Sattamaha, which means the best of the perfect. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.3, it is said, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschidyatat siddhaye. Out of millions of persons, one may try to become Siddha, perfect. Or, in other words, self-realize. A self-realizer person knows that he is not the body, but a spirit soul. Aham Brahmasmi. At present, almost no one is aware of this fact. But one who understands this has attained perfection and is therefore called Siddha. When one understands that the soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, and one thus engages in devotional service of the Supreme Soul, one becomes Siddha Sattama. One is then eligible to live in Vaikuntha or Krishna Loka. The word Siddha Sattama therefore refers to a pure devotee of the Lord. Since the Yamadutas are servants of Yamaraja, who is also one of the Siddha Sattamas, they knew that a Siddha Sattama is above the demigods and sub-demigods, and indeed above all the living entities within this material world. The Yamadutas therefore inquired why the Vishnudutas were preventing them from carrying out the orders of such an exalted soul as Yamaraja. It should also be noted that Ajamila was not yet dead, for the Yamadutas had been stopped before they could snatch the soul from his heart. Ajamila was simply on the verge of death as the argument progressed between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas. The conclusion of that argument was to be a decision regarding to who would claim the soul of Ajamila. Spiritual beauty. The Vishnudutas exactly resembled Lord Vishnu. The Yamadutas had never seen them before, because the Yamadutas stay in an atmosphere where only sinful activities are executed. Therefore, they were astonished at the presence of these beautiful personalities and said, by your bodily features, you appear to be very exalted gentlemen. and you have such celestial power that you have dissipated the darkness of this material world with your effulgence. Why then should you endeavor to stop us from executing our duty? It will be explained that the Yamadutas, the order carriers of Yamaraja, mistakenly considered Ajamila sinful. They did not know that although he was sinful throughout his entire life, he was purified by constantly chanting the holy name of Narayana. The Vishnudutas were so effulgent, they were residents because they were residents of the spiritual world, where everyone and everything is self-effulgent. As Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 15.6, Natad bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha. My abode is not illuminated by the sun, the moon, fire, or electricity. The Yamadutas did not know where the Vishnudutas had come from, but they could see that the Vishnudutas were not ordinary. Since they were so effulgent, they had 4 arms and they were extremely beautiful. The dress and bodily features of the residents of Vaikuntha are accurately described in these verses. The residents of Vaikuntha, who are decorated with garlands and yellow silken garments, have 4 arms holding a disc, flower, club, and conch shell. Thus, they exactly resemble Lord Vishnu, except for one very prominent feature, the Kaustubha jewel, which the Lord wears on his chest. The residents of Vaikuntha have the same bodily features as Narayana because they have attained the liberation of Sarupya. But they nevertheless act as servants. All the residents of Vaikuntha Loka know perfectly well that their master is Narayana or Krishna, and that they are all his servants. They are all self-realized souls who are Nitya Mukta, everlastingly liberated. Although they could conceivably declare themselves Narayana, they never do so. They always remain Krishna conscious and serve the Lord faithfully. Such is the atmosphere of Vaikuntha Loka. Similarly, one who learns the faithful service of Lord Krishna through the Krishna consciousness movement will always remain in Vaikuntha Loka and have nothing to do with the material world. Beyond the material world. In our conditioned state, we cannot know about the spiritual world, but the spiritual world exists. As Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita 8.20, Parastasmatu bhavo nyo. Besides this inferior material nature, there is another superior nature. This material nature is one nature, comprised of millions and trillions of universes clustered together in one corner of the spiritual sky. We cannot even measure the sky covered by this one universe, within which there are innumerable planets. Yet there are millions and trillions of universes in the entire material creation. And the entire material creation is only 1/4 of existence. In other words, this whole material world is existing in 1/4 of Krishna's energy. The other 3/4 comprise the spiritual sky. Unfortunate persons think that this planet is all in all. But this is frog philosophy. A frog in a well cannot understand anything beyond the well, and he measures everything in terms of his well. When he is told about the ocean, he cannot imagine it. Similarly, persons with such a frog's mentality imagine God is like this, or God's kingdom is like that, or I am God, or there is no God. But this is all foolishness. Chapter 7. Authorized discrimination. Sukadeva Goswami continued. Being thus addressed by the messengers of Yamaraja, the servants of Vishnu Vasudeva smiled and spoke the following words in voices as deep as the sound of rumbling clouds. If you are actually servants of Yamaraja, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of your religion. What is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all persons engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? Srimad-Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 1, text 37 to 39. What our representatives of Dharma should know? The Yamadutas protested to the Vishnudutas. You are so exalted that it is not very good for you to interfere with our business. The Yamadutas were surprised to see that the Vishnudutas, although exalted souls, were hindering the rule of Yamaraja. Similarly, the Vishnudutas were also surprised that the Yamadutas, although claiming to be servants of Yamaraja, the supreme judge of religious principles, were unaware of the principles of religion. Thus the Vishnudutas smiled, thinking, what is this nonsense they are speaking? If they are actually servants of Yamaraja, they should know that Ajamila is not a suitable candidate for them to carry off. The Vishnudutas began to speak in grave voices. You claim to be the representatives of Dharmaraja, Yamaraja, the superintendent of death and the maintainer of religion, and you accuse us of interfering in your business, which he has entrusted to you. Therefore, would you kindly explain what is dharma or religion and what is adharma or irreligion? If you are actually representatives of Yamaraj, then you can answer this question. This inquiry put by the Vishnudutas to the Yamadutas is most important. A servant must know the instructions of his master. The servants of Yamaraja claimed to be carrying out his orders, and therefore the Vishnudutas very intelligently asked them to explain religious and irreligious principles. A Vaishnava knows these principles perfectly well because he is well acquainted with the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam saranam vraja. Give up all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Therefore, surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the actual principle of religion. Those who have surrendered to the demands of material nature instead of to Krishna are all impious, regardless of their material position. Unaware of the principles of religion, they do not surrender to Krishna, and therefore they are considered sinful rascals, the lowest of men, and fools bereft of all knowledge. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 7.15, Namam dushkriti no mudha prapadyante naradhamaha mayaya apahruta jnana asuram bhavamashritaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are the lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. The question posed by the Vishnudutas was very suitable. One who represents someone else must fully know that person's mission. The devotees in the Krishna Consciousness movement must therefore be fully aware of the mission of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya and the philosophy of Krishna Consciousness. Otherwise, they will be considered foolish. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, "E Krishna Tattvaveta, say Guru Hai." One must know Krishna, then he can become a guru. Not just anyone can become a guru. Thus the Vishnudutas challenged the Yamadutas. If you are truly representatives of Dharmaraja, then you must explain what is religion and what is irreligion. That should be the criteria for determining who is actually a representative of religion. It is not that everyone should be accepted as religious or as a guru. Widespread ignorance has given rise to many persons calling themselves God, representing so much nonsense in the name of Dharma. When someone says, I am God, or I have become God by mystic yoga, one should challenge him. In America, a man claimed, I am God, everyone is God, and thus gathered disciples. One day he was suffering from a toothache, and I asked him, what kind of God are you that you are suffering so much from a toothache? Only a lunatic or a cheater claims I am God. Officers of law enforcement. One who has the power to punish others should not punish everyone. There are innumerable living entities, most of whom are in the spiritual world and are Nitya Mukta, everlastingly liberated. There is no question of judging these liberated living beings. Only a small fraction of the living entities, perhaps 1/4, are in the material world. And the major portion of the living entities in the material world, 8 million of the 8,400,000 forms of life, are lower than human beings. They are not punishable, for under the laws of material nature, they are automatically evolving. Human beings who are advanced in consciousness are responsible for their actions, but not all humans are punishable. Those engaged in advanced pious activities are beyond punishment. Only those who engage in sinful activities are punishable. Therefore, the Vishnudutas particularly inquired about the criteria Yamaraja uses to determine who is punishable and who is not. How is one to be judged? What is the basic principle of authority? These are the questions raised by the Vishnudutas. The Yamadutas felt that they were faultless because they were following the orders of Yamaraja, who himself is faultless. Just because a magistrate has to direct the punishment of those who transgress the law does not mean the magistrate is a criminal, is a representative of the government. Similarly, although Yamaraja has jurisdiction over the regions of hell and deals with all sinful persons, he is a pure representative of Krishna and simply executes the order of his master. A police constable is supposed to know the law and whom to arrest for breaking the law. If he arrests anyone and everyone, then he himself is a criminal. He may not arrest the law-abiding citizens. Similarly, the Yamadutas cannot take away just anyone and everyone to the court of Yamaraj. They can take only the non-devotees to be punished for their sinful acts. Yamaraja has especially cautioned the Yamadutas not to approach Vaishnavas. However, because Ajamila had been very sinful, the Yamadutas could not understand why he should not be considered a criminal and be brought to Yamaraj for punishment. Devotees and demons. There are two classes of people in this material world: those who are servants of God, called devas or suras, and those who are servants of Maya, illusion, called asuras. In the spiritual world, however, there is only one class, because the inhabitants are all servants of God. Therefore, the spiritual world is called absolute. There is no disagreement in the spiritual world, as the center is Krishna or God, and everyone there is engaged in his service out of love, not as a paid servant. A paid servant will serve in proportion to the money he receives, but in Vaikuntha, there is no question of being a paid servant. Everyone is liberated and everyone is as opulent as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but everyone is still a servant. In the material world, people serve out of need, but in the spiritual world, everyone serves out of love. There is no need for anything because everything is there. Everything there is absolute, is complete. The Brahma Samhita says that in the spiritual world, there are kalpa vruksha, or desire trees, from which one can get anything he desires. In the material world, service is forced upon everyone. If someone does not render service, he will starve. Even a king has to work. What to speak of the poor man? Under the direction of the Supreme Lord, the material energy makes everyone into a dancing dog. The master says, please dance, and the dog dances, because he knows that unless he performs, he will starve. Whether in the material world or the spiritual world, everyone is a servant. But here, people are under the impression that they are masters. The head of the family thinks, I am the master of my wife and children. But in fact, he is serving each and every member of his family. The state executive officer thinks, I am the king, or I am the president. But actually, he is the servant of the citizens. Servitude is his position. And unless he serves the citizens according to their expectations, he will be deposed or fail to win re-election. In the material world, everyone is trying to become master of all his service. And thus, there is competition on every level, between self-acclaimed gods, between heads of state, even between friends and family members. In this illusory competition to be master, everyone fails. Mahatma Gandhi was respected as father of India, but after all, he was just a servant. And when one man did not like his service, Gandhi was killed. Similarly, President Kennedy was a very popular president, but somebody saw some discrepancy in his service and he was also killed. No one is really the master here. Everyone is either a servant of Maya, illusion, or a servant of God. Everyone has to obey the government laws. Under the spell of illusion, however, the criminal thinks, I do not accept the government laws. Yet, when he is caught, he is forced to obey the government laws in the prison house. He has no choice. Similarly, we are all servants of God. But the demoniac class of men, asuras, do not care about God and God's laws. These rascals think that there is no God, or that everyone is God, or that they themselves are God. But such gods must also follow the laws of God in the form of birth, death, disease, and old age. Only persons who are totally illusioned refuse to serve God. Instead of voluntarily rendering service to God, they are the slaves of Maya, the illusory energy of God. A person who is haunted by ghosts speaks all kinds of nonsense. Similarly, when a living entity is haunted by Maya or engrossed by the illusory effects of the material nature, he also talks foolish nonsense. And the most foolish talk is to claim that he is God. Among the two classes of men, the divine devas and the demoniac asuras, there is an ongoing struggle. The asuras are always rebelling against God, and the devas are always surrendering to God. In the story of Prahlad Maharaj, we see that even among family members, there are devas and asuras. Prahlad Maharaj's father, Hiranyakashipu, was an asura, whereas Prahlad Maharaj was a deva. Naturally, a father is affectionate toward his child, but because Hiranyakashipu was a demon, he became the enemy of his son. That is the nature of demons. Of course, even a tiger has affection for her cubs. And so at first Hiranyakashipu showed affection for Prahlad Maharaj, who was a very well-mannered and attractive child at 5 years old. One day Hiranyakashipu asked his son, "My dear boy, what is the best thing you have learned in school? Tell me." Prahlad Maharaj replied, "One should sacrifice everything to realize God. This human form of life is the best opportunity we have for making spiritual progress, and it must be utilized for realizing God." Hiranyakashipu angrily inquired from his son's teacher, "Why have you taught all this nonsense to my boy?" They fearfully answered, "Sir, we did not teach these things to this boy. He is naturally inclined toward God. So what can we do?" As soon as he gets the opportunity, he begins to teach God consciousness to the other boys in the class. In the absence of his teachers, Prahlad Maharaj would immediately stand up on the bench and address his friends. "My dear boys, this life is not for enjoying sense gratification. It is for realizing God. Do not forget this." Similarly, we have taken up this preaching mission because people in general are interested only in immediate sense gratification, which is not good for them. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam 5.5.4, Lord Rishabhadeva says, "Nonam pramattak kurite vikarma yadindriya pritaya apranoti." Simply for sense gratification, people are committing so many sinful activities. They are just like madmen. A madman does not know what he is doing. Materialistic persons are so much engrossed in their pursuit of sense gratification that they have become maddened and commit all kinds of sins. Lord Rishabhadeva says that the materialistic way of life is very risky. For those who indulge in sense gratification, Krishna gives the facility, forcing them to take birth again in the material atmosphere. A monkey has very good facility for enjoying sex. In some ways, a monkey is renounced. He lives naked in the forest. He eats only fruit. But his nature is that he must have at least 3 dozen wives for sex enjoyment. So-called renunciants who wear the cloth of a sadhu but secretly enjoy illicit sex with women are just like monkeys. This is demoniac. Demons or asuras do not believe in God and act according to their own whims. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.15, Krishna describes them as follows. Namam dushkutrino mudha prapadyante naradhamaha mayaya apahurta jnana asuram bhavamashritah. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest amongst mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons do not surrender unto me. Here Krishna clearly states, Asuram bhavamashritah. Because the demons have taken shelter of atheistic philosophy, they are the lowest of mankind despite their advancement of education, science, and politics. Someone might object, how can you call an atheistic gentleman with a university degree a demon? He is so educated and highly qualified. The verdict of the Shastra is that although he appears to be very learned, his actual knowledge has been stolen away by Maya on account of this being atheistic. Scriptural injunctions may not be very palatable. Nonetheless, they are authoritative, and we have to preach the truth. We cannot play hide and seek with the problems of life. We must know our real position, and we must know what is religion and what is irreligion. Religion means action according to the orders of God, and irreligion means action that goes against the orders of God. So we're going to stop here at chapter 7, and we'll continue in part 2 from chapter 8. And before closing this reading today, we're going to have small kirtan as prescribed in this book and as well as in all the shastras about chanting the holy name of God. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Jai Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Again, thank you very much for joining today's reading. And we hope that you will be able to join us in the next reading, the continuation from chapter 8 of the book, A Second Chance. Thank you again, once again. Hare Krishna.